Rev.Jessie Brandon, and you're watching Epiphanies. It's the opportunity for me to bring together two of my favorite things, people and books. And what I'd like for you to do is get into your comfy chair and maybe grab a drink, a cup of tea, and let's see what we're talking about today. So, this is the Complete Conversations with God, which is absolutely fabulous. I have them in separate books. It is by Neale Donald Walsch, and it is the story of him being in utter despair and sitting down and writing a letter to God and getting answers back. And it was just so amazing that he's written many books about it. And one of my deepest desires, he does something twice a year where you can go and be in his hometown at a bed and breakfast near where he lives. And he spends, I believe it's 4 or 5 days with a maximum of 9 people just discussing the books and discussing life. I just think that would be a little bit of heaven. So that's Conversations with God, and my guest here today that is discussing it is Debora Christy-Love. And welcome, Debora. It's so good to have you.
Hi, Jessie. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So Debora Christy-Love embraces life, sharing her writing, psychic gifts of spiritual communication, facilitating hypnosis, past life regression for clients, and teaching energetic healing. She interacts to assist others to self-empowerment. Her creativity includes writing songs and music, and she has an album, Love Will Find a Way, and together with her husband, David, they offer metaphysical and holistic services and classes right here in Barrie at www.barriespiritual.com, and that, of course, will run on a tape. So, Debora, great to see you. I'm going to give you the book and
Thank you.
ask you, why did you choose this book?
Well, I think this book covers so many topics. It's really kind of a life guide. I came across it back, I believe it was probably not long after my mom passed. And she passed in '97. So I was going through a lot of changes, searching for things, and this book offered so many answers that I resonated with, and it just felt to me like I knew these things on a deep level. And this book was reminding me of this deep inner truth. And yeah, it made me change a lot of my outlooks on life. And it just was very helpful for me.
That's super. I know that for me, I came across it at about the same time, I think. My daughter was born in '95, and it was right around that time that I was in a reading group that actually had been going for 3 years and went for another 12. So it was a really impressive reading group. And we did all kinds of books like this. And many of them are here on my shelf, and that's why. And so for me, it wasn't, it didn't answer a knowing. It opened a door of wonderment, and it did identify a lot of things that I didn't understand previously. And also for me, I had been raised in a very strict religious home, and so when I left home, I didn't say the word God without spitting the curse off. And it is so funny now, that book is the first one where I read about a God that I could really get with.
Yes,
and now here I am, an ordained minister, so it is really funny. So so you chose this book because it offered you comfort at a time of bereavement.
Yeah, but it offers answers for many things. And it makes people, I think, as you said, not afraid of God. You know, I grew up with a Catholic background too, so that was scary, you know. And I did have a near-death experience when I was young, so that scary God didn't make sense to me right from the beginning.
Wow, yeah.
So I was always questioning, like, what is it with this religion thing? Like, why are people doing all these things that didn't make sense to me?
Right.
This book made sense of God. And it just, like I said, kind of felt like it was things I already knew, and it reinforced it for me. So it also tells you can't really get it wrong. You know, we're all on our individual path, and there really isn't a wrong.
Yeah,
and that's so comforting. It's so comforting.
Yeah.
And I mean, Neale is question and answer. It's simple. It's not complicated.
Right.
It's not, do I have to decipher it and study it and figure it out? It's question and answer. It couldn't be simpler,
Yeah.
you know? And he goes off on so many tangents and directions that it covers so much. It covers so many popular beliefs and thinking that's out there, and it takes them apart.
Yes. It's sort of like, I just got this image in my head. You know how when you say something and somebody goes, what, didn't you know that? And you say, hey, I didn't get the instruction booklet. I must have been behind the door when they handed them out. This, to me, is the instruction booklet. It really lays down what everything is about. And gives you answers that feel comfortable, that you can get with.
Yeah, and they make sense. It's not like it's something that isn't logical. It makes sense, you know? And I think for me, when things are simplified, it's better. I mean, you can take something complicated and simplify it. And humans tend to complicate things.
Right. It's like, I love Eckhart Tolle, but I really have to sit and think about some of the things that he says so that they become clear to me what his intention is. And I love him, but this is just a really nice, simple, loving read, and you feel good.
You do.
When everything that you learn from it. Is there something in there in particular? Now, this is book 1, 2, and 3, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So for me, I know in book 1 there was, I love this, the 10 commitments rather than the 10 commandments.
Right.
And I just love that, because it's not about how we're supposed to behave to be in God's favor. It's about God's commitment to us, that if we follow a certain way of living, this is what we get from it. And I just love it. So tell me, what have you got there?
Well, I have bookmarked a spot where God is kind of explaining himself. And Neil is saying, okay, absolute power demands absolutely nothing. Is this the nature of God? And God answers back, you now have understood. I have said God is everything, and God becomes everything. There is nothing which God is not. And all that God is experiencing of itself, God is experiencing in, as, and through you. In my purest form, I am the absolute and am absolutely everything, and therefore I need, want, and demand absolutely nothing. I thought that's perfect.
Yeah, I really love that.
It makes sense.
It does.
It does.
Is there, are there other passages that spoke to you, that gave you little gifts as you went along?
There was a passage where in my meditations I had been told one time that there's not really new learning here, it's experiencing and remembering what we know on a spirit level. And when I came across passages like that, it was like, oh my gosh, it was such validation for what I'd been told in my own you know, wonderings and meditations. So it just was kind of that aha moment. It's like, oh, okay, I really was connected.
That's so cool.
You know?
I think for me, it helped me to develop my philosophy around what I believe, and I guess over time, you know, you hear different people say different things, and some of it resonates and some of it doesn't. But he laid down a path for me that I could follow, and to tell you the truth, I don't even know if it was his book where I first learned about Earth School. But what I've come to is an understanding that God, and you know, by whatever name you call it, the power that is, created all of this and had knowledge of all of this, but couldn't experience it. And so he created mankind in the image of himself, which means we're all a piece and a part of God. And our whole journey is about experiencing all that can be experienced. All emotions, all activities, absolutely everything. Choosing what works for you, letting go of what doesn't. Absolutely no judgment, because you're just here to experience and then to remember that you are a part of God. And I just absolutely love that, because...
I do too. It's very comforting.
Exactly right.
And I think that people miss that sometimes. We're always looking, and because there is that base remembrance of all being one. We think, well, there should be one thing that works for everybody. There should be black and white. There should be something that works for everyone. But the whole point of being here in 3D on Earth plane is we're all unique. That is the point. The very point of our existence is to have a unique experience. What would be the point of us all being the same? God already had that experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're all here to do it differently.
Right.
And to see what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
And that makes it more fun.
I love that. See what the possibilities are. What a great phrase.
Yeah.
Really nice.
It's infinite, you know, it really is infinite. And that's why it's kind of, we're all playing a part in God's never-ending story.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, how does that work with free will for you? What would you describe that whole thing? Free
will it's really a gift, but we have to consider it carefully, because with that gift is a lot of power. We are gods. We are many gods.
Yeah.
So we do experience the result of our free will and our choices. So there is no one really to blame but us. If we don't like where we are or what's going on, we have to take responsibility with the free will.
Absolutely, I love that. Yeah, take responsibility for the choices that you make. Not and you use the word blame, and I'm just gonna say not to blame yourself, but hold yourself accountable. Right. Which I think is, we use the word blame. We're always, we blame our parents for, the way we are today because of our upbringing. Well, get over that, because they were just like us, doing the best they can do. Exactly. And we blame, the influence of things around us for our reactivity. Well, you know what? Give up your reaction and try paying attention and just responding to what's happening. Yeah. And then get to the point where you don't even need to respond, because you're working it all out inside. Yeah. And you can just enjoy what's happening. Exactly. And if you don't like what's happening, you can make a different choice.
Yes, and I think for me it helps you learn not to judge others, not to judge self harshly, and that there's no consequences for our decisions except the results of the decisions. There's no punishment, there's no judgment on the other side. It's really, you kind of learn by doing it, and if you don't like it, you change something. Yeah, exactly. It's trial and error. It's not, and error is only in our judgment. It's just kind of, let's see what happens, and if we like it, we'll continue some of it, and we'll kind of improve as we go.
Yeah, tweak it and make sure that we're, and then of course there's always, life is change, everything is change. So you can be, I always related kind of my daughter's growing up to this, is that just as soon as you get them when they're born into some sort of pattern, and you just think, oh, I can finally go to sleep, they change. Yeah. And you're like, oh my gosh, I got to start over again, figure out what's going on here. Well, I think that's just a prelude to the realization that that's the way life is. Just when you've got everything in place and you think, yeah, I can do this for the next 30, 40 years, boom, something changes. Yeah. And I just bumped into someone today who said that he had his life, to paraphrase, his life kind of exploded. And he said, when you get hit with something and you tend to defend yourself and deflect it, he literally couldn't tell which way to turn because the punches were coming from every direction. Right. And I said, yeah, I understand that, because I had the same thing happen to me when my life exploded. There was like 8 things in 6 weeks. And what you have to come down to is that things around you may be changing, but you're always, always a child of the universe, a child of God, the infinite being. Right. And that is the one thing that remains constant. And so therefore, it's the one thing that will survive, is your soul. Yeah. Who you are is your soul. It's not what you do, it's not what's going on around you. It's that knowingness of who you are. And once you get that, then it's just a matter of, oh, so this is changing. Okay, this is where we're going today. And just being comfortable with those changes. Would you say, what is your...
I agree with that. I think you kind of lose your fear a little bit of, am I safe? We're always safe.
Yeah.
there's nothing, there's no such thing as death. There's only more life. There's changing states of life. There's changing awareness all the time, but, and growth. But there is no such thing as death, or you know, nothing's going to harm you forever. I don't really like the word forever. There is things, you know, life is forever, but it's changing forever. Nothing stays the same forever. So if you don't like it now, you're going to like it better later. Yes. You know, it is going to change.
And the thing is to just embrace the fact that it's a different experience. I have another friend whose daughter is in high school, and she's really, really not having a good time. And I said, remind her that it's not permanent. It's, you know, she's got 2 or 3 more years of high school, and then life is just going to be so different. And if she can just accept that what is happening is just what is, and this too shall pass, it's temporary, and then the other one I use is the ebb and flow of tide, you know?
Kind of sounds familiar. I felt like I was getting through high school too. It was kind of not, you know, my most enjoyable years at sometimes, but I thought, yeah, it was something I needed to get through, and I did. You know, it was, I knew it was temporary, as you said, and that helps. Yeah. It does help.
And isn't it amazing what we understand now about, say, high school? I keep thinking to myself, well, just, if we could just tell the kids when they're entering high school, you may not like the subjects or the way you have to learn this stuff, but understand that what you're being taught is how to learn and is what's out there. And so if you take it as that, do you understand what I mean? Yeah. Then it's not so hard. You think, oh, okay, so I don't necessarily have to become an English major, but what I'm learning is how to write so that I can write, you know, a good resume or a good letter, and how to think. Because that was the biggest shock for me when I got to university, was that college was about teaching you to do something, but university was teaching you to think about that. And if we started that idea earlier, I don't know if they would understand it, because I don't know how much I understood at 14, but I just think if we told them that this isn't about what you're learning, it's about how you're learning, would be so much more beneficial. I think that's one of the things that I loved about this book was, for me, it gave those examples of how you can learn and how you can adapt and what's coming at you. So speaking of things coming at you, I'm sorry that I missed your open house and your book launch, but tell me about the book that you've written. You mentioned it a little bit.
Oh, okay. Here is my book. It's called There's Love. It's my near-death experience and beyond. Okay. Because I was only 4, just barely turning 4 when that happened. I had my tonsils out and went on a journey. Wow. And I did not want to come back, to be quite honest. I had a great adventure there. But I've written about how that's impacted my life. Now, for a lot of years, it was kind of hidden away. I didn't remember all of it or most of it, because it would have been too hard to live here and grow up, having remembered everything at that time. But when I got to be around late 30s to 40, it all started coming back to me. And even at that time, I was a little bit depressed. It was kind of like, huh, I'm here. Why am I here? They tricked me into coming back. But then again, you get to that point of acceptance eventually, that I'm supposed to be here. There's a purpose for everything. And you accept it much more. But it's about my whole life as finding the pieces. Your soul's trying to guide you. We have this map inside guiding us along the way. And if you listen and trust and follow those instructions, it leads you where you need to go. You don't always have all the answers at once, and that's what my book is about. I would get things coming to me and go, huh, that's interesting, you know, and then 15, 20 years later, something would happen and go, oh, that's where that fits together. That makes so much more sense now. Yeah. And my whole life was like that from the time I was young. Really? Yeah. So I talked to my guide a lot when I was young. Yeah. And that kind of went away as I grew up. I realized that's different, that's odd. Didn't go over well when I told a few things to people, so I kind of learned to just keep that stuff inside and not work with it, because you get busy growing up and living life, and it goes away. And at that point of, as I said, 30, late 30s and 40, it was kind of, well, my kids were growing up by that time. I'm like, I should really get back to that. I had something going on back then that I want to know more about. So that's when I started really meditating and remembering my experience, and all the things started falling into place in my life that I knew that was going to happen. And then it would happen 15 years later, and it would go, oh, yeah. Does that happen to everyone, or is that just me? I don't know.
It is interesting, and I love that sense of knowingness, that when things, you get that message, and then, as you say, 15 years later it happens, and you go, I have to admit that I didn't communicate with anything in the beginning. I know that I was an odd child. I spent a lot of time in closets. I really loved being in the dark with a flashlight and a book. And so I'm surprised I don't have my sat dark. But anyway, I loved that. And I think of things now, and it's just so clear to me, oh, that's what that was about. I knew things about people. I knew things they were thinking. I knew intentions. And when I tried to talk about it, people would get really mad at me. Like, I didn't intend that. I wasn't thinking that.
It was more like they didn't want you to know that.
Exactly. And yet you knew, because you could follow it all the way through, what they were thinking, what they'd done, and how you knew that beforehand. And so it's interesting to me, because I didn't get an instinct of that until, well, I know it was 1990. I can't remember how old I was, I guess 34 or something. But that's when I began to get pictures and to feel that resonance of things that made sense to me. I remember one class that I took where the woman had sand, and she had someone put their, like, I left the room, she had someone put their hands in it, and then I came in and I put my hands in it, and I knew who it was, and I knew what their concern was. And but I didn't know what the heck that was. I guess it's kind of like school all over again, because I didn't know why that was happening. I didn't know how it was happening and why it was happening to me. And yet now, all these years later, it's all come together. And as I'm remembering these things happening, it's adding to the experience that I'm having now. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what you do in the community, in your work.
Well, I do a lot of readings for people, and I am a hypnotist, so I do a lot of past life regression work. And that was huge in my life. It helped me uncover so many mysteries, unravel things that were going on in my present life that just the pieces made it come together. When I learned about the past lives, it was like, oh. And it also, as I said, that non-judgmental thing. You know, things happen in our lives. We have, I believe we have a contract. We've signed up for a lot of things, agreements with other people. And they don't make sense as they're going on sometimes in this life, but when you can look back into the past lives, it all comes together.
Now, do you believe in Akashic records, or does this have anything to do with Akashic records?
Oh, I believe there is Akashic records. Now, that to me is just kind of the memory banks of all that is. Everything is recorded.
Right.
In that record or memory, if you want to call it. It's a collective conscious memory.
Okay, because the way I was trained is that it's as though the soul's entire history, my soul's entire history is written there, and something that's occurring in this life could have been caused by something I did or did not do in a past life. And so discovering that piece may help me correct what's going on now. Is that how past life regression works? It
is. We have, I believe, similarities, things that we decided to work more on, that we didn't quite complete or we didn't get to our satisfaction. And some people will call that karma, but karma is not a punishment. Karma is something we choose. We look at our review and our life on the other side and we think, well, you know, I could have done that a little better. I'm not really happy with that. And it's not so much a judgment as I could work on that some more. I think I could do better next time. So we'll have similar situations in the next lifetime come up, and they will bring up those same issues that we get to work on in a new setting, with new people, with new circumstances, but yet that same thread.
Right.
That goes
now, what else
it.
do you do? Do you teach Reiki? I hear you do.
I do. I do
okay.
teach Reiki. Yeah.
All right. And what else? I know you and David work together to do several different things.
Well, David's a minister, as you know, like you are. So we were at Aurelia Star of Hope for a while, and David has stepped down from there now just to pursue his own interests right now. So we're kind of open to new things. David's a writer as well. He's got a few books written, and yeah, I mean, he does weddings a lot like you do.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things like that. We do the classes, the psychic development, helping people embrace their intuition.
Yeah.
And so we like to do that, meditation classes, etc.
Very cool. And all of this takes place at your home?
At the home,
Okay, that's super, right. Well, I wanted people to know all of the scope of the things that you do so that when your information runs across the screen and they want to get in touch with you for whatever it is you're doing. Now, I noticed you brought your CD.
Oh, yes.
And this is Love Will Find a Way, and this is available at iTunes as well, right?
It is. It's available most places you can get music. Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. All right. And also directly from you.
Yes.
Right. Oh, I love your Tree of Life tattoo. Yes, I have one too.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you said, Spirit told me, I was sitting there one day and one of my guides was showing me this on my ankle and giving me all the instructions of how it should look, and I got thinking, okay, that was unusual.
Yeah.
So next thing you know, I had this Tree of Life tattoo.
Oh, that's super. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you.
It's good to hear all the things that you're doing, and of course your book, There Is Love, My Near-Death Experience and Beyond by Debora, Christy-Love, and of course Conversations with God, the one book that I love to talk about because it changed my life, and it's wonderful to hear your perspective on it. So I thank you for joining us today here on Epiphanies. I'm Rev.Jessie Brandon, and go out there and live your best life. Thanks for joining us.